Hi, I'm Dan Kubisky with the Washington, D.C. chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists and the SPJ International Community Chair. There are a lot of universities and colleges around the world that have courses in journalism, and yet there are only about 120 universities in the world that are accredited to do so. With me is Steve Geimann, who was recently named president of the Accrediting Council on Education in Journalism and Mass Communication. Steve Geimann is Mr. Journalism. Besides retiring after a spectacular career as a journalist with UPI and Bloomberg, he was also the president of the Society of Professional Journalists and in the past year revitalized the Washington, D.C. SDX Foundation, which provides scholarships for journalism students in the Washington, D.C. area. Steve, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Okay, so the ACEMJC is 80 years old this year. At its website, there is a 13-page document called Accrediting Standards. Now, this describes what the organization is looking for and what universities seeking accreditation need to provide to gain accreditation. So let's just start right at the beginning. Why is accreditation important, and why do some universities have it and some don't?
Well, Dan, thanks for having this chat with us today. I've been involved with the journalism accreditation process since the late 1990s, serving as a representative for the Society of Professional Journalists for almost 18 years. And I can tell you, schools that are accredited maintain a rigorous, continuous improvement policy to make sure their students are getting the latest, best education to prepare them for work in both journalism and mass communications. Mass communications, as we define it, public relations, advertising, strategic communications. Journalism and mass comm have been sort of married for many decades now. And the schools that are accredited, a little over 110 in the United States and another 10 outside the United States in places like the United Arab Emirates, Chile, and New Zealand, in Mexico, they have all sought accreditation from our body because they want to show their students, the parents of their students, and the people who fund them that they are committed to the best and most vigorous process of self-evaluation. Accreditation isn't easy. Some schools bypass accreditation because they're not prepared to invest the time, the energy, and the resources in making their programs meet the standards that we have jointly agreed. And when I say we, it's the academy, the educators, and practitioners like me and others from broadcasting, from public relations, and from advertising. We've agreed on these set of standards that the accredited schools agree to. Now, that doesn't mean that schools that are not accredited do not provide good value for education. We just believe that accredited schools provide a well-rounded, liberal arts-based, liberal and broad-based education that other schools might not have the same standards to meet.
Okay. All right. So maybe you could walk us through the process of accrediting a school. How does the process start? What do you look for? How long might it take between an application and finally getting accreditation?
Well, the process starts with the school. We don't go onto a campus and say, we want to accredit you, here's what you must do. The schools contact us, the programs contact us and say, we are interested in being part of the community of accredited schools around the world. What do we have to do to achieve that status? We then engage in a discussion about what's required. We show them the standards. There are 8 standards, and those standards cover everything from how the program is run and governed by the faculty and by a dean, what the curriculum contains, how they measure the ongoing progress that students make and what they learn at the end of 4 years in college. We also look at how they are preparing a culturally diverse workforce for the future. We used to call this diversity, equity, and inclusion, but in the current political climate, we've changed the name because the real goal is preparing students who are going to school today to be ready to work in a environment, in a community, in a neighborhood or a city that doesn't look like them necessarily. So we're trying to create a culturally proficient workforce. We also look at the faculty. How experienced are the faculty? How much research, scholarly and otherwise, do they commit to in the course of a given year? Are they properly credentialed to teach journalism and mass communications? We also look at how well they care for their students while they're in the program. We want to know that students have a clear understanding of what it takes to get a degree after 4 or 5 or 6 years. What services are provided to students while they're in the program? Do they have assistance opportunities? Do they have internship opportunities? We also look very critically at where do they exist? What kind of building do they have? What sorts of resources are available to students? How do they produce television programs for the broadcast journalism students? Are they properly equipped and adequately resourced for doing the things that advertising and journalism need? And then the last thing we look at is what sort of contribution do they make back to the profession, back to the community, and back to journalism in general? All of those things require a lot of effort, a lot of moving parts, and a school that is interested in becoming accredited will set down for themselves what it is they think they're doing, how they're meeting our standards. There are 2 parts of our process, and 2 very important parts of the process. One is the preparation of what we call a self-study. This is when the school, the College of Journalism and Mass Comm, the School of Media, whatever it calls itself, puts on paper how they are meeting the various standards that we've developed. This document is often several hundred pages long, and it shows in great detail what the school is doing, how they're training students, how many students in a classroom, for example, where they're teaching skills, abilities, aptitudes. And they talk about their faculty, they talk about how they measure progress. All of the standards that we have required them to meet, they are showing us how they meet those standards. The second important part is perhaps for some people the most fun, perhaps for the school the most stressful. It's the arrival of a site team made up of practitioners like me and educators who come from the programs that are accredited. And we spend 4 days on the campus evaluating that self-study. If they say they're teaching 15 courses of a particular subject, we want to make sure that's what the curriculum shows, that's what the syllabi show. If they say we've got these kinds of cameras or these kinds of computers in the editing labs, we're checking to make sure those items exist, that everything is in proper working order. We're on campus usually from a Sunday through a Wednesday. And during that time, we're talking to faculty, we're talking to students, we're talking to other people who are involved in working with the faculty from the journalism and mass comm program. And then we write a report. The team writes a report showing what we learned, how we feel the program is meeting the standards. And at the end of that process, we make a recommendation, just a recommendation, that the program either be accredited or reaccredited if they've been previously part of the program. You get 6 years, you're reviewed every 6 years, and or you're put on provisional status, which means we found something not quite right, and you now have 2 years to correct that deficiency and come back to us and say, we heard what you said, we've made these changes, and as a result, we now feel we are fully compliant, on all of the 8 standards that you look at. So it's the invitation from the school for us to come on and look at what they're doing. It's the preparation of a self-study on the part of the program to tell us what they're doing. The site team, which evaluates on the ground what's actually in place. The next 2 parts of the process are somewhat bureaucratic. We have 2 committees that evaluate these site team reports. The first group is called the committee, the accrediting committee. They look at each of the reports from the teams that went out during the course of the academic year, and they try to assess, okay, we had a couple of programs that had similar deficiencies. These are the steps we need to take to be fair to everybody. Then that committee sends its recommendation to the council, the Accrediting Council on Education in Journalism and Mass Communication. That council is the final word. It meets in May, late April or early May every year, and evaluates those site team reports, evaluates feedback from the schools in response to those reports, and then renders a decision that says the schools are reaccredited and they're good for the next 6 years. They're provisionally accredited and have to come back to us making some revisions, or you're not reaccredited, you're denied reaccreditation. And I will tell you, Dan, that last step happens very rarely. In the 25 plus years that I've been involved in this program, I've never participated in a decision in which we've denied outright the reaccreditation of an
Wow.
existing program.
Okay.
So lots of moving parts, lengthy process. Schools can spend up to 2 years on getting ready for a site visit, 3 to 5 years if they're going up for the very first time. So it's not a process that you can do overnight or flip a switch and say, okay, now we're going to do this.
So that 3 to 5 years, let's say for somebody applying for the first time, that includes the self-study, or is that additional years that they put in to get their self-study report done?
What we usually do with a school that has not ever been accredited is we will send somebody out, usually an individual, who will go and make what we call a pre-visit. The pre-visit is a one-on-one conversation with the people in the program. It's not part of any record. It's really an informal discussion between the school seeking accreditation and somebody representing the council. Sometimes it's a past president of the council or an educator who's been deeply involved in accreditation, but they'll set down what they think the school still needs to do to meet the high standards that we set. The school then has a roadmap to fill in the blanks, correct the deficiencies, even out the high points and the low points, and then they'll come back with a formal self-study that we tend to look at. That self-study process, the schools are starting their self-study now or later this summer of 2025, for visits that will take place from 2026 to 2027. So that's how long this
Okay.
process takes for a school that wants to be reaccredited. And it's important to note that the reason why we have this 6-year cycle, it takes a while for programs to get the hang of what this is all about. We want to make sure that there's a process in which the schools are looking at themselves on an annual basis. What did we do well? What did we do not so well? And where can we improve? The line continuous improvement is a big catchword in the accreditation community. Self-studies, site visits, the whole process of accreditation really encourages programs, schools, and whatnot to continuously evaluate what they're doing, how well they're doing it, and make adjustments as necessary so that you don't have to crash 2 years before the site visit team comes to campus and try to make everything right. The
Right.
goal is to be right all the time.
Right. Now, sometimes some universities will rotate classes through. So maybe one year they might hold a course on being a foreign correspondent and then not do it for 2 years. Uh, the addition and removal during a time while they are accredited, does that affect their accreditation at all, or how does that work?
Something as specific as that would not necessarily hinder their accreditation. We have a number of instances in which we point out that because some courses are offered so infrequently, it does tend to delay a student's ability to graduate on time. It's not something that we prefer, but we're not prescriptive. We don't tell the programs, you must do this, you must do this, you must do something else. It's desired that students who need certain classes to graduate have access to those classes on a semester by semester basis. Because as I said, if you skip a year or skip a couple of semesters, you've effectively delayed a student's graduation because they aren't able to get access to the class
Okay.
because it's not taught. We don't tell schools, you must teach these courses, you must teach these subjects, you must teach this many hours. We say a well-rounded journalist or mass communicator needs to meet or understand some basic skills and competencies. Curriculum has to be well balanced and varied. It has to have a concentration or at least an awareness of the liberal arts. It doesn't do you any good to have all of your classes as a student. It doesn't do you any good to have all your classes in journalism or PR advertising. Teaches you how to write, but what are you going to write about if you don't have
Right.
a
Right.
well-rounded education in the liberal arts? So those the gap years when the course is not given, not a hindrance, doesn't affect their accreditation, but we take note of the fact that sometimes that may delay a student's ability to graduate on time.
Okay. Okay. So obviously, accreditation is important to a university. Uh, do you keep track of how aggressively the schools promote their status with the council? And do you think it pays off for them?
Well, two things. We don't, once our work is done, once we tell the school, yes, you've met all of our standards, you've done it in exemplary fashion, you've done it in just barely fashion, we don't make a judgment on that score. We either accredit or provisionally accredit a program. Once that's done, our involvement with the school is over for the next 6 years. But we do encourage programs to identify themselves as being part of the accredited community. In the last 2 years, we actually developed a little marker, like a good housekeeping seal of approval, something that schools can put on their website showing that they are accredited by the Accrediting Council on Education and Journalism and Mass Communications. Many more schools are doing this because it singles them out from everybody else that teaches journalism or offers journalism mass comm courses. We don't get involved in aggressively marketing that. We have online what we call our little handbook of, this is an old one, an outdated one, because we've gone to all electronic, digital. All of the information that's contained in this booklet is on our website. And that website has all of the schools listed alphabetically that are accredited with links to their programs so that people can check them out in one stop at our ACEJMC.org website.
Okay. I want to put my international community hat on for a second here, because you do have 10 or 15 schools overseas that are accredited. And while around the world, there are certain basic beliefs and standards and practices among legitimate independent journalists, but some of the countries you're in, where you have accredited schools, they have a dismal record when it comes to press freedom. And even in the places where press freedom is allowed, there are historic and cultural differences on how aspects of journalism is performed from country to country. So how do you address those issues within the ACEJMC guidelines?
Because we don't tell programs in this country or overseas how to teach courses and how to teach classes. We do tell them that because press freedom is very important to us, there needs to be some recognition of how the free press operates outside that country, the country in which we're visiting an international school. As an example, there are currently, I want to say, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 international programs, almost 8 international programs, plus 4 campuses in Puerto Rico that are accredited. Is Puerto Rico part of the United States, or is it an international school? It's not on the mainland, but they are accredited. We have 5 programs in the United Arab Emirates that are accredited. 3 of them are, one of them is a public university, the rest are private universities. I've done 2 visits to Zayed University, which is a public institution, and most recently, the American University in the Emirates, which is a private university. In both cases, they're teaching their students about press freedoms and how press freedom looks in other parts of the world, in Western Europe, in the United States, in the Western Hemisphere. They acknowledge that their press does not operate in the Emirates the way the press operates in France or Germany or the UK or the United States. But those students are aware of the differences. Those students know that what's happening in their country is not the norm around the world. And it's important to us that the students get a representative sampling of what press freedom looks like. We can't hold them to account for the lack of a First Amendment in a place like the United Arab Emirates, but we can require that press freedoms, understanding press freedoms and understanding how that works around the world is part of the curriculum.
Okay. How is all this financed?
Schools that are involved in the program pay a fee on an annual basis. It's about $1,000, $1,500 per year. During the accreditation cycle, there's more money invested on the part of the schools and part of the programs. So the first round comes from the schools that are participating in the program. There's a yearly fee to be part of the process. Schools also pay the expenses for the site team to come onto campus for the 3 days. So they're paying airfare, they're paying for accommodations while they're on the campus, and paying for any incidentals. Normally, most of the meals are covered by the program itself. Box lunches inside, catered lunch when you're meeting with people involved in the program. And then the organizations that sit around the table, both the educator organizations and the professional organizations like SPJ, RTDNA, the American Advertising Federation, the Public Relations Society of America. We all pay $3,000 per year to be members of the organization. So when you add up 120 programs around the world, the 23 seats that are accounted for sitting around the council table, you have a budget that's somewhere in the neighborhood of about $200,000, give or take a bit. My math may be a little rusty at this point. So it's bottom line, it's self-funded. ACEJMC is not part of any other organization. We're not a subset of SPJ or RTDNA. There are other professional accrediting bodies like the Bar Association that deals with law schools, the American Library Association, which deals with schools of library and information sciences, where their accrediting process is part of the larger organization. In ACEJMC's case, each of the member organizations has decided to foot the bill, contribute to the operation of the organization. It's a very small organization. The staff is one full-time executive director and one full-time associate executive director. And those two people make the machine run. They pair up the teams that go out to do the site visits. They work with the schools intensely on, what's in their self-study, what's missing, what needs to be put in to make it a well-rounded self-study that will be clear and understandable to the team that makes the visit. But we don't answer to any, larger body within our profession. We do answer to an organization called the Council on Higher Education Accreditation, CHEA, C-H-E-A. They operate as the accreditor of accreditors. So every 10 years, we have to submit what we do to that body. So they know and we know that we're doing the right things when it comes to being an accrediting institution, an accrediting body.
Okay. I looked at some of the teams that you have sent out, and just on the journalism side, there's some very, very impressive names on there, besides your own name, of course.
Thank you.
Um,
Before we move on, let me just point out that one of the things in my new role as president of the council is in my intent to try to recruit more people from the professions, journalism, TV, print, digital, public relations, mass comm, strategic communications, advertising, more people who are actually going back into workplaces at the end of their visit. We are in need, always in need of more individuals who are working in the profession to take part in the process to evaluate what these schools are doing. It's important that the professionals be involved. We are, after all, in these schools of journalism and mass comm, training tomorrow's workers. We're training the people to be future editors, anchors, reporters, PR specialists, advertising salespeople, advertising creative people. So it's important that the people doing that kind of work now take part in this process on an ongoing basis. There are lots of people who look like me. They've got to be 25 years younger than I am, because this is a process. Our continual improvement is making sure that new people get into the mix and commit the time to do the work.
okay, that's great. Just, last question, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to add to a better understanding of the organization?
Well, I think anyone who's watching this understands that higher education in 2025 is under intense political assault. Higher education has been given a bad rap, I think, by people who believe the value of a college education is no longer valid in this day and age. A lot of people are pushing students into vocational schools to prepare them for a trade. And while that's important, you cannot minimize the value and the role that higher education plays in building a society and maintaining a society and helping a society move forward. Because journalism and PR and advertising are all part of a communications profession that helps inform the public it's very important that people understand and respect what's being done. When you read about attacks at Harvard, which, by the way, is not an accredited school, they don't have a journalism program per se, but when institutions of higher education are being attacked just because they're doing things that don't necessarily agree with the point of view of the people who are holding office today, people should recognize higher education, colleges, universities, programs of journalism around the country are providing a valuable service in training the journalists and the communicators of tomorrow. I'm involved and invested in this process, and in my role as president, I expect there to be more opportunities, more instances where I'm going to have to defend why it is we ask schools to produce the kind of journalists, the kinds of graduates that they're producing. It's very important. Accreditation is likely to be one of the issues that the current occupant of the White House brings up as a detriment to higher education. I think it's a value. I think that accreditation, the process that schools voluntarily go through because they want to be better, they want to stay the best in the country, whether they're a large university like Missouri or North Carolina or my school, Syracuse, or small programs, state colleges like Kent State or Iowa State that are, providing instruction and education for the next crop of journalists. I just think it's very important that everybody understand the value of a good education, and especially a good education at an accredited school.
Okay. Well, Steve Geimann, new president of the Accrediting Council on Education in Journalism and Mass Communication. Thank you very much for taking the time to explain this to us. And I think you can rest assured that there will be some notices of seeking volunteers on your behalf in some of the SPJ publications coming out soon.
I hope so. I welcome it.
Again, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan.